I'm so excited to show all of you how to put together a delicious strawberry rhubarb pie today. It's one of my favorites from my childhood, although I think I like it better now in my adulthood than I did in my childhood. Either way, I'm going to show you the basics of pie making with pie crust to a delicious rhubarb strawberry pie coming up right now on Cooking with Chef Bryan. Welcome everybody to Cooking with Chef Bryan. Today I'm going to show you how to do pies. We're talking pies 101 kind of. I'm going to show you a delicious strawberry rhubarb pie. This wasn't actually a very big favorite of mine when I was little because the rhubarb was too tart. And so if you're not familiar with rhubarb, this is what it looks like. You can see it in the fresh produce section in the grocery stores. But right now in Utah, in the spring, in the Rocky Mountains, I should say, area, rhubarb is on. And this is a strawberry rhubarb variety, and you can tell that because of the red on it. There are other types of varieties, but I think this is one that is a very sweeter, I should say a sweeter variety than the other varieties of rhubarb. So you can check them out, but these are all ready to go, and I'm kind of excited. Those are right from my mom's garden, and so how fun is that? She went out and picked them for me so I could show you how to put together this pie. But we're going to start with the pie crust, and I'm going to use butter today. Now butter, out of all of the fats, I think is the one that is the most difficult to work with, but you have to start with it where it's just ice cold, right straight out of the refrigerator. It's going to be very hard to work with, and I'm going to actually be cutting the butter and flour together in my food processor. So that's going to make this a lot easier versus a pastry cutter that some of you may be familiar with and have made many pies from. Now you can use shortening, you can use lard, you can use any type of fat that you so choose, but I think butter is going to give us a really nice flavor. So what I'm doing is just cutting these up into little smaller pieces so they can go into the food processor with the blade on there. And I'm going to use a cup of butter to 3 cups of flour, about a teaspoon or so of salt, and then the water in there to bring it all together. When I do this in the food processor, I actually don't like to add the water directly into it. I'll mix it in this bowl here because I think it gets a little too tough in the food processor when you have the water that you've mixed into there. So let's just cut up this other one here so that it's ready to go. You can do a mixture of butter and shortening if you want to, or all shortening or all butter like I'm doing. It's just up to you, however you would like to make your pie crust. So once that's into there, I'm going to add in the flour to it. I'm just using an all-purpose flour. Very simple, very easy. And let's do this. My little puppies are getting excited, the dachshunds. If you follow me on Instagram, Chef Bryan Woolley, you'll see pictures of the dachshunds. Gus, the dachshund, the little gray one, loves pie dough. And so he's like, ooh, you're making pie dough. I'll stick around in case anything drops to the floor. So let's go ahead and add those into there. There's the 3 cups of that. I'm going to grab some salt, put some salt into that. So a very simple pie crust recipe that you can put together. This is one that my mom uses, it's one that I use, and it's one that I don't know how old it is. Maybe my great-grandmother used it. I don't know, for all that matters. So let's put that into there. And now this is the nice thing about the food processor. And the other day I did talk quite a bit about food processors on the show, and I got a lot of questions from all of you at home watching. So once again, food processors are not all created equally. This is the Cuisinart Elite series, and that's just the one that I buy. But it's an induction motor. It has a very heavy base on it, so when I push on the buttons, it moves immediately. If it is a like a belt-driven one, there's a lot of lag in the response of the motor, and so it doesn't chop as good, I don't think so. And it's a lot noisier. So now what I'm doing is just looking to see if that has chopped it all into there, which it has. That's how fast the food processor is. I think they're great at making pie because you can cut that fat into that flour so easily. And so that's another reason why I think every kitchen needs a good food processor in it. But not only needs a good food processor, you need to learn how to use the food processor. And so that's the nice thing about it. So that butter is cut in with the flour on there. To that, I'm going to add just the water into it. Now, a lot of times, people will add ice water into there, and that's fine. The whole concept of a flaky pie crust is the cold fat in there. So when it goes into the oven, that cold fat will melt, produce steam, and cause lift in between the layers of the flour. And that's what's going to give it that flaky crust. But if it's too warm, the fat in there, it'll melt into the butter itself or into the flour itself. And so it won't give you those layers of fat and flour and fat and flour. So that's why you want to keep everything cold as possible. Notice I'm not really mixing anything with my fingers because my fingers are warm, and I'm just going to mix this together with a fork till it comes somewhat together. It needs just a little bit more water. And this is why recipes are merely, to me, just guidelines, because it depends on what's happening with the flour or the humidity outside, or whatever. It can change. And so that looks like that's about right. Now, instead of taking this and working it in here, what I'm going to do is just take it and dump it right onto my countertop. Just kind of scrape that out, and then I'll very gently finish putting this all together, or just kind of pulling it all together into a cohesive mass of dough. So once this gets all together, it's ready to roll out for our pie crust, and that's what we'll be doing next. I'll show you how to roll this out into our pie tins. Notice I'm not kneading it at all. I'm just kind of pressing everything together. So don't go away. We'll keep working on these pies. When I come back, we're going to roll this out into our pie tins.
As summer comes into full swing, it's time to fire up the grill and treat your family to a special outdoor meal featuring everyone's favorite Klondike brand potatoes. Enjoy preparing one of our many chef-inspired recipes from the web, or create your own backyard culinary masterpiece using varieties from the full line of Klondike potatoes. Visit KlondikeBrands.com today for hundreds of recipe ideas and make your summers sizzle with Klondike Brands.
Welcome back, everybody, to Cooking with Chef Bryan. It's all about pies today. It's a rhubarb strawberry pie, perfect for spring or any time of the year. Now, I have to admit, I didn't really care for rhubarb when I was younger, but now in my older age, I love it. So we start off with the pie crust. Here it is now. It's just formed into a cohesive mass of dough here, and this is enough to make 2 double crust pies. And so what I do is take my bench scrape, I'll cut that in half evenly, and then I'm going to cut each one of those halves in half evenly. So I have quarters, 4 quarters. And I'll set these aside. Those are going to go ahead and be my bottom and top crust for each pie. So I love bench scrapes. If you don't have one, you need to grab one because they are really very handy in the kitchen. Okay, let's take a little bit of flour over here so that we can flour our work surface. Now be careful, you don't want to add too much flour to the pie crust if it's already dry, because if it's already dry, then you're going to have a really dry pie crust. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to kind of just shape this a little bit better into a ball. Notice I haven't kneaded the dough at all. It's still very rough, but it's just all pulled together. And that's what you want for the crust. Make sure we've got lots of flour so it doesn't stick, because when that butter kind of comes out of there, it'll stick to the counter. So now we're going to just kind of carefully roll this. I'm going to dust the top again because I can see the butter there and it's just kind of sticking to my roller. I'm going to roll that out. As I'm rolling, I'm lifting up so it doesn't stick, and then I'm making sure there's lots of flour on the bottom. If it begins to stick to the counter as I roll it, it won't give me a good idea of how large the pie crust is. So make sure it does, because if it sticks, then when you unstick it, it shrinks back. It kind of fights you a little bit. So make sure we have lots of flour so it doesn't stick. Let's roll that out again. And then just kind of roll. And I'm trying to keep this the best that I can into a circle. Like I said, the best that I can. It's not crucial that I do. So now I've got to test this to see if I've got it rolled out enough. So I'm going to take my pie tin and just set that on there. This is going to be the bottom crust. So I'm eyeballing it, looking to say, oh, okay, I think that's going to fill up my pie tin, both the bottom and coming up the sides. So just kind of take it, lift it up, fold it over on itself, bring your pie tin over, and then very carefully lift that up, lay it halfway over, and then just flip that right over so that it fills up that pie tin. Now, I've done that a few times, And so don't panic if your first time doesn't go perfectly. Now let me just warn you also, if you get, and I hope you can see this here, this little kind of like cut in the pie crust, the bottom pie crust, it's fine, don't worry about it, because this is the bottom crust, and we'll go ahead and just kind of close that up just like that. So very, very simple to close up. And if I needed to, I could lay another piece of dough right on top of it. So that's very easy. Okay, let's do it one more time for our second pie crust here. And then we'll get the filling going so that the filling is going to go into there as well. This is where the bench scrape comes in handy. Just kind of scrape at those pieces that are sticking to the countertop. The reason for that is they can actually cause the dough to stick, and we don't want the dough to stick. I think I'm going to use this one here. If I have a piece that feels a little bit larger than the other one like this one did, I'm going to use it for the bottom crust because I have to cover more area with the bottom crust than the top crust. And so you can just kind of do that at home. And notice I'm just kind of shaping this a little bit so that it's round, kind of pressing it down. And now I'll just roll that out again with my rolling pin. I love pie crusts. I don't think you can see this at home, but I can see swirls of the butter and the flour in there. And so I know that I've got some really nice layers of the flour and butter mixture going on there. So I'll have some nice flaky pie crust. Now the key with the pie crust is you don't want to overwork it. If you overwork it, it's going to be tough. I know a lot of people put eggs in theirs, or some people put vinegar in their pie crust. This is just my basic pie crust, and I've used it for years and years and years, and it works really well for me. That's just getting my way, so let's set that over there. Roll that out a little bit. You can see, and you'll be able to see where it's sticking to the countertop. So let's just roll this out one more time. That looks just about right. Let's give it a little test and just set that on there. It should have enough around there so you can eyeball going, oh, it's going to come up the edges of the pie crust. And it looks like it's going to, pretty good. So I'll bring this over, fold it in half, lay that halfway into the pie tin, and then just pull that over. So fold it over, flip it over so that it is over our pie tin. And so when you press it down into the pie tin, use this part of your finger here and just kind of press it into the curve of the pie tin. Don't use your fingertip because you could poke through that crust. Okay, so now here's the bottom crust. This is where you would fill the pie with whatever filling you're going to do. You could do cherries, you could do apples, you could do blueberries, you could do peaches, you can do any of those types of fillings. We're going to be filling it with some rhubarb strawberry. I love fruit pies, and so that I think is one of the best ways to do that. And now with our fruit pie, I have the rhubarb here. I'll just set this here for a little bit while we get this all prepared. And I'm going to cut these up into smaller pieces. So, probably about 1/2-inch pieces or so. So I'm going to keep working here, getting these all put together. When we come back, we'll have the fillings, and it'll be delicious.
It's no secret, frozen rolls are fresher than bakery rolls. You see, bakery rolls are made in commercial bakeries. Then they sit all day in stores. Some even contain preservatives because rolls begin to stale immediately. By the time you eat your roll, it could already be days old. Rhodes Bake and Serve is found in your grocer's freezer. Simply take Rhodes frozen roll dough home and let it thaw and rise in a pan. Bake Rhodes rolls in your own oven. Rhodes Bake and Serve, hot and fresh, right out of your oven.
Welcome back, everybody, to Cooking with Chef Bryan. We're working on pies today, a strawberry rhubarb or a rhubarb strawberry pie, however you'd like to look at it. Earlier, we made the crust. I showed you how to put them into the bottom shells. I've sliced up rhubarb into here, and I'm slicing up the strawberries. My trick with strawberries, since they're already going to cook and become macerated and things like that, I use frozen strawberries. They're a lot more economical, and I can always keep them in the freezer when I need them. So to this now, we're going to add a couple of cups of sugar. Now this is dependent upon what type of rhubarb you're using, how sour it is. If you need to increase the sugar, you can certainly do that, or decrease it however you want to. Now I'm going to add a little bit of flour here to make sure that thickens up nicely in there. And so that's going to be the thickener in there. And let's just kind of toss that all together in there. There we go. And I have enough in here for both of the pies. So we'll put this together there. So let's take these now, and I'm just going to kind of scoop those into there. Lay those there, just like that. Let's put some in the other one here. And I'm just dividing it between the two pies. And so this is going to be what is going to go in there. And as far as the sugar and the flour, don't worry, we'll divide that also between the two of them so that they all go in there and everything is nice and even. Now the thing about a strawberry rhubarb pie or fruit pies in general, they can really boil over in the oven. So be sure that you use or bake it on a baking sheet so that it catches any potential boil over of juice that comes from that. And that's one of the reasons too why you use the flour in there to help it thicken up a little bit. So let's just kind of put those all together. And at this point you can put some butter on there if you wanted to. I'm feeling pretty good with that since I have butter in the crust. We're going to do the top crust now. So the same thing with the top crust, but this doesn't have to be quite as large because we're not covering the entire bottom of the pie shell as well. So let's just take a little bit of flour. Once again, we're going to dust that off here, grab my rolling pin here, and we'll just kind of roll this out so that it is the top crust. Make sure that we get this nice and rolled out. And you can hold, once again, the pie tin over it to get kind of an idea of how large to roll this out. I know there are some of those cooking things that have the form of the pie tin, pie round shapes on them that gives you, oh, here's how far you want to roll that out, etc., etc., etc. Me, I just eyeball it, good old-fashioned pie making. That's all I'm going to do here. So let's just roll that out just a little bit more. And that looks like it's going to be pretty good. Now you can test it, once again, taking the pie, just holding it there, making sure it is all the way out and around that edge there so that when we put this on there, it will cover the entire top. Oh, almost forgot one of the most important parts. You need a steam vent in there to allow the steam to escape. I cut into here kind of a little leaf shape. It is probably over 100 years old, that little shape. My grandmother did it, my great-grandma did it, Mom does it, and now I do it. And so you can see now how that is just going to hold right over onto that, and then we'll trim all of that pie crust from around there. Let's do this last one really quick. Let me grab a butter knife here. Just for time's sake, I better show you really quick how to trim that off. You're just going to trim that all the way around it. There we go. Trim, trim, trim. And just a little bit more. You can tell, this is actually one of my favorite parts with the pie. I don't know, I like the filling, the way it fills when you're cutting the crust away. And you can use these little scraps here, roll them back out, sprinkle them with some cinnamon and sugar and bake them off and have little treats. I take my fork and just take it, press it down to seal those two edges the best that you can in there. Go all the way around, and then I'll take an egg and just egg wash it. So an egg, a tablespoon of water, whisk it together, brush that on top, sprinkle it with some sugar and nutmeg, and these are ready to go into the oven. I love homemade pies. They're so easy to do. Yes, I've done a lot of them, but if you haven't ever made a pie, it's so satisfying. Okay, so I'll keep working on these. When we come back, I have some finished pies, and we'll enjoy a slice of strawberry rhubarb pie.
As summer comes into full swing, it's time to fire up the grill and treat your family to a special outdoor meal featuring everyone's favorite Klondike brand potatoes. Enjoy preparing one of our many chef-inspired recipes from the web, or create your own backyard culinary masterpiece using varieties from the full line of Klondike potatoes. Visit KlondikeBrands.com today for hundreds of recipe ideas and make your summers sizzle with Klondike Brands.
Welcome back, everybody. Let's finish up these delicious rhubarb strawberry pies. So I have the ones here that we just finished up in the previous segment there. I have the sugar on top. I brushed them with an egg wash, a little sugar, some nutmeg. I think nutmeg goes a lot better with a rhubarb pie over cinnamon, but it's just up to you. It's a personal preference. These are going into a preheated 350-degree oven for about an hour, or until the crusts are golden brown and you start to see the filling bubble. It's got to bubble so that you know the flour has been activated to thicken it. These ones are already finished. I can't tell you how delicious the house smells. And honestly, how many of you have ever whipped cream in your blender before? Well, honestly, it was slicker than slick to whip that cream in that blender. I'm going to add some of that right onto there, and it is perfectly done, ready for some springtime old-fashioned rhubarb strawberry pie. Now, you can go on to cookingwithchefbryan.com and get this recipe. And so head on over there and get it, as well as hundreds of other recipes. And of course, you can always find me on social media. I'm on Instagram, Chef Bryan Woolley. I always will answer your questions on there when I get to them. It's the one that I pay closest attention to. But I'm on Facebook and other ones as well. But I hope you go and get this pie and you thoroughly enjoy it. It's a delicious pie of rhubarb and strawberry, or you can do any type of fruit pie that you want to. Thanks for joining me today, everybody. I hope you learned a little bit about pies, and I'll see you all next time. You can find all of these complete recipes on my website, cookingwithchefbryan.com.